The morning sun cast long shadows across the golden wheat fields of New Haven as Jake Morrison walked the dirt path between the crops. His boots crunched softly on the gravel as he checked the irrigation systems that kept this distant world green and alive. The air smelled of fresh earth and growing grain, a scent that reminded him why he had left Earth's crowded cities behind 5 years ago. New Haven was everything Earth had promised when they recruited colonists for this distant world. The planet Kepler 442b sat in the perfect zone around its star, with clean water and soil that grew anything humans planted. 12,000 people had made the long journey here, leaving behind the noise and wars of their homeworld for something better. Jake stopped at the edge of the Central Valley and looked back at the small city they had built. White buildings with red roofs dotted the landscape between green fields and blue streams. Children played in the parks while their parents worked in the fields or the workshops. It looked peaceful because it was peaceful. Dr. Lisa Carter finished her morning rounds at the medical center and stepped outside to enjoy the cool air. She had been a military doctor for 15 years before coming to New Haven, treating wounded soldiers in 3 different wars. Here, her biggest medical emergency was usually a broken arm from farm work or a child with a fever. She preferred it that way. Lisa walked toward the school where her friend Roy Henderson taught the colony's children about farming and science. Roy had been a Marine captain before he became a teacher, leading men in battles across 2 star systems. Now he showed 8-year-olds how to plant seeds and 10-year-olds how to fix water pumps. He said it was better than teaching people how to kill. The colony had no military base, no weapons factory, no defense grid around the planet. The original planners had decided that New Haven would be different from the fortress worlds that humans usually built. They would prove that people could live in peace even in the dangerous galaxy around them. Most of the colonists were like Jake, Lisa, and Roy. They had seen enough fighting and wanted to build something better. Former soldiers became farmers. Old engineers designed irrigation systems instead of weapons. Retired pilots flew crop dusters instead of fighter ships. They all shared the same dream of a quiet life under alien stars. 3 months ago, the first Zephyrian scout ships had appeared at the edge of the star system. The insect-like aliens stayed far from New Haven, watching and recording everything they saw. Jake had reported the sightings to Earth, but the response was always the same. The Zephyrians were a known species that usually kept to themselves. No need to worry. The Zephyrian scouts saw exactly what they expected to see. Soft humans growing food on a defenseless world. No orbital platforms, no missile batteries, no fleet of warships. Just farmers and their families living in an easy target that would make a perfect addition to the collective's growing empire. Admiral Crixthack studied the reports from his scouts while planning the easiest conquest of his long career. The humans had spread themselves across the planet's surface with no thought of defense. Their largest settlement had maybe 30,000 people, mostly civilians with no military training. His fleet of 300 ships could take the world in a single day. The collective had been expanding for 2 centuries, taking worlds from weaker species across this part of the galaxy. Humans were newcomers to space, barely 200 years since their first ships left Earth. They built their colonies like the peaceful farmers they appeared to be, which made them perfect targets for a species that understood only strength. What the Zephyrians did not understand was why these humans had chosen to live so far from their military protection. Every other species they had conquered lived in heavily defended systems with their strongest warriors. These humans seemed to have sent their weakest members to their most distant colonies. Jake Morrison was checking the morning reports when the alert came through his communication system. Earth Defense Command was tracking a large fleet moving toward the New Haven system. The message was brief and military in tone, telling him to prepare for possible hostile contact. Jake stared at the screen for a long moment before activating the colony's emergency broadcast system. The warning went out to every home, farm, and workplace on New Haven. Jake's voice was calm and steady as he told the colonists that unknown ships were approaching their world. He asked everyone to remain calm and follow the emergency procedures they had practiced during their first year on the planet. Dr. Lisa Carter heard the announcement while treating a farmer's injured hand. She finished bandaging the wound with steady fingers, but her mind was already shifting into the mode she had hoped never to use again. She began mentally cataloging medical supplies and thinking about which buildings could be converted into emergency treatment. Centers. Roy Henderson was teaching a class about plant biology when the alert reached the school. He dismissed his students early and watched them run home to their families. Then he walked to his office and opened a locked cabinet that had not been touched since the colony's founding. Inside were detailed maps of New Haven's terrain and defensive positions that the early colonists had built just in case. Across the colony, other former soldiers were making similar preparations. They moved with quiet efficiency, their civilian facades falling away to reveal the warriors underneath. These people had come to New Haven seeking peace, but they had not forgotten how to fight. The underground bunkers that most colonists thought were just storage areas were actually command centers and supply depots. The irrigation tunnels that carried water to the farms could also move people and equipment without being seen from above. The solar power collectors that provided electricity could be quickly converted into communication arrays. New Haven had been designed by people who hoped for peace but planned for war. Jake Morrison stood in his office as the sun set over the wheat fields, looking at reports from the outer system sensors. The approaching fleet was definitely hostile and definitely heading for New Haven. He activated the quantum communication array hidden beneath the administration building and sent a priority message to Earth Defense Command. The message was simple and direct. New Haven was under attack by a superior force. They would defend themselves as long as possible, but they needed help. Jake did not mention that the colony's 12,000 residents included over 3,000 former military personnel who had chosen farming over fighting, but had not forgotten their skills. As night fell over New Haven, the colonists prepared for battle. Children were moved to the deepest bunkers while their parents checked weapons that had been stored away for years. The peaceful farming colony began its transformation into something the Zephyrians would never expect. The galaxy's deadliest mistake was about to begin. The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system, like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. 300 ships of various sizes moved in perfect formation toward the small blue planet that hung peacefully in the void. Admiral Crixthak watched from his command ship as his fleet prepared to add another world to the collective's growing empire. The attack plan was simple and had worked on dozens of other worlds. Orbital bombardment would destroy the humans' communication centers and government buildings first. Then landing ships would deploy ground forces to secure the major population centers. The aliens expected complete surrender within 6 hours, maybe 8 if the humans proved more stubborn than usual. Jake Morrison watched the approaching fleet on the sensors hidden deep beneath New Haven's administration building. The underground command center had been built during the colony's first year. Disguised as a water treatment facility, now it hummed with activity as former military officers took their positions at control stations they had hoped never to use again. The first Zephyrian attack began at dawn with bright flashes in the sky as energy weapons struck their targets. The aliens had aimed for what their scouts identified as communication towers and command buildings. Instead, they found themselves destroying empty structures that the colonists had built as decoys. The real infrastructure lay hidden beneath the ground, protected by layers of concrete and steel. Dr. Lisa Carter felt the ground shake as the bombardment continued overhead. She was already in the underground medical facility, checking supplies and preparing for casualties. The peaceful doctor had vanished, replaced by the military surgeon who had saved lives in 3 interstellar wars. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she organized triage areas and surgical stations. The bombing lasted for 20 minutes before the first Zephyrian landing ships entered the atmosphere. They came down like falling meteors, their hulls glowing red from atmospheric friction. The alien commanders expected to find a planet in chaos, with terrified humans running in panic from their burning cities. Instead, they found empty streets and silent buildings. The colonists had vanished into the underground tunnels and bunkers that honeycombed the area beneath New Haven. The aliens landed their troops in what they thought was a conquered city, but they had actually walked into the largest trap in human colonial history. Roy Henderson crouched in a concealed observation post built into what looked like a grain silo. Through his scope, he watched Zephyrian soldiers moving through the streets below. The insectoid aliens were larger than humans, with forearms and natural armor plates covering their bodies. They carried energy weapons and moved in disciplined formations that spoke of military training. But Roy had fought aliens before, and he knew that discipline could become a weakness when facing an enemy that refused to follow the rules. He activated his communication headset and whispered coordinates to the teams hidden throughout the city. The real battle was about to begin. The first Zephyrian patrol disappeared near the market square. One moment they were advancing down the main street, the next moment they were gone. Their squad leader called for a report, but received only silence. The aliens had encountered their first taste of human ingenuity in the form of concealed pit traps that dropped them into underground holding areas. Jake Morrison coordinated the defense from his command bunker, using a network of hidden cameras and sensors to track every alien movement. The man who had spent 5 years growing wheat was now directing a military operation with the skill of a seasoned general. His calm voice guided defense teams through underground passages that connected every major building in the colony. The Zephyrians soon discovered that the humans had not fled in panic. Instead, they had prepared a killing ground that turned every street into a potential ambush site. Windows that seemed empty suddenly sprouted rifle barrels. Manholes exploded upward to release grenades. Buildings that appeared abandoned became sniper nests that picked off alien soldiers with deadly precision. Admiral Crixthak watched his casualty reports with growing alarm. His ground forces were supposed to be securing objectives and accepting human surrenders. Instead, they were being systematically hunted by an enemy that seemed to know every hiding place and every weakness in Zephyrian tactics. The easy conquest was becoming a nightmare. The aliens tried to adapt by calling in air support from their landing ships, but the humans had prepared for that too. Surface-to-air missiles emerged from hidden silos disguised as water towers and storage buildings. The colonists had spent years building defensive positions while pretending to be peaceful farmers, and now their preparations were paying off in alien blood. Dr. Lisa Carter treated her first patients as wounded colonists were brought to the underground medical center. A farming equipment mechanic had taken shrapnel from a Zephyrian grenade. A former teacher had been grazed by an energy weapon while leading children to safety. Lisa worked on them with the same steady hands that had once saved soldiers in military hospitals across human space. The battle raged through the day as more Zephyrian reinforcements landed. The aliens brought heavier weapons and more soldiers, but they could not seem to gain control of the city they thought they had conquered. Every building they cleared would be reoccupied by humans who seemed to appear from nowhere. Every street they secured would explode in gunfire when the next patrol tried to use it. Roy Henderson led a team of former soldiers in a raid on a Zephyrian supply depot. They moved through irrigation tunnels that carried them beneath the alien positions, emerging behind enemy lines to destroy ammunition and equipment before vanishing back underground. The man who had taught children about sustainable farming was now teaching aliens about sustainable warfare. By evening, the Zephyrians controlled nothing except the ground their soldiers were standing on. The humans had turned New Haven into a maze of death traps and ambush sites that negated every advantage the aliens thought they possessed. The insects' superior numbers and technology meant nothing when they could not find their enemies or predict where the next attack would come from. Jake Morrison's evening report to the colonists was broadcast through the underground communication system. His voice remained calm and steady as he described the day's victories and losses. 57 colonists had been wounded, but they had killed over 300 Zephyrian soldiers and destroyed a dozen of their aircraft. The farmers of New Haven were winning their war. Admiral Crixthak stared at his tactical displays as night fell over the human colony. Half his ground forces were dead or missing. His air support was being shot down faster than he could deploy it, and he still had no idea how many humans he was actually fighting. The primitive mammals had somehow become the most dangerous enemy the collective had ever faced. The Zephyrians prepared for another day of fighting, not knowing that they had made the galaxy's deadliest mistake. The emergency signal from New Haven reached Earth Defense Command at exactly 14 minutes past midnight Greenwich Standard Time. Admiral Susan Blake was awakened by her aide and rushed to the command center where the priority message waited on her personal terminal. She read Jake Morrison's report twice before activating the emergency response protocols that would shake the entire human military establishment. Within an hour, every human military base from Earth to the outer colonies was buzzing with activity. Ships that had been in routine patrol or maintenance were ordered to immediate combat readiness. Crews were recalled from shore leave, and civilian contractors were given emergency mobilization orders. The attack on New Haven had triggered the largest military response in human history. Captain Alex Rodriguez was sleeping in his quarters aboard the battleship Retribution when the alert came through. He had been dreaming about his brother Carlos, killed in a colonial raid 15 years earlier. The irony was not lost on him as he read the orders that would take his ship to defend another human colony under attack. This time he would arrive in time to make a difference. The Retribution was the newest and most powerful ship in the Earth Defense Fleet, designed to fight the kind of war that human planners hoped would never come. But as Rodriguez studied the tactical reports from New Haven, he realized that the war had found them anyway. He ordered his ship to maximum speed toward the embattled colony, knowing that every hour of delay would cost human lives. But the military response was only part of humanity's reaction to the attack on New Haven. Across human space, civilian ships began changing course toward the distant colony. Merchant vessels loaded with medical supplies and volunteer fighters. Mining ships equipped with industrial lasers that could punch through alien armor. Even passenger liners joined the growing armada, their luxury compartments converted into troop transports. General Patricia Wells coordinated the massive response from her command center deep beneath Geneva. She had studied every report about the Zephyrian Collective and understood what many politicians did not. This attack was not just about one colony. It was about testing human resolve. If New Haven fell without a response, every human world would become a target for alien aggression. The general's orders went out through quantum communication arrays to every human settlement in the galaxy. All available ships were to converge on New Haven with whatever weapons and supplies they could carry. This was not just a military operation. It was a statement that humanity would defend its own no matter how far from home they might be. On New Haven, Jake Morrison continued to coordinate the defense from his underground command center. The second day of fighting had been even more brutal than the first, with Zephyrian forces trying to break the human resistance through sheer firepower. But the colonists had held their ground, turning every street into a killing field and every building into a fortress. The reports from Earth gave Jake hope, but he knew that help was still days away. His people would have to continue their desperate fight against overwhelming odds until the relief fleet could arrive. He looked at the casualty reports on his screen and felt the weight of command that he had never wanted but could not abandon. Dr. Lisa Carter worked through her second straight day in the underground medical facility, treating wounded colonists with supplies that were running dangerously low. She had performed 17 major surgeries since the attack began, saving lives with equipment designed for routine medical care rather than battlefield trauma. Her training as a military surgeon was the only thing keeping many of her patients alive. The doctor knew that medical supplies were being rushed to New Haven from across human space, but she also knew that many of her patients could not wait for those shipments to arrive. She began making the hard decisions that field surgeons learn to make, choosing who could be saved and who was beyond help with the resources she had available. Roy Henderson led another night raid against Zephyrian positions, moving through tunnels that connected the colony's defensive network. His team had grown from the 5 former soldiers he started with to nearly 30 colonists who had proven themselves in combat. Teachers, mechanics, and shopkeepers had become elite fighters under his leadership. The raid targeted a Zephyrian command post that the aliens had established in the colony's former city hall. Roy's team emerged from storm drains and utility tunnels to attack the building from 6 different directions simultaneously. The aliens had learned to expect human tactics, but they still could not counter the colonists' intimate knowledge of their own territory. Admiral Crix Thack received his own reinforcements on the 3rd day of fighting, doubling the size of his invasion force, but the additional troops only meant more targets for the human defenders, who had learned to turn Zephyrian strengths against them. The aliens' rigid command structure became a weakness when human snipers began targeting officers. Their advanced technology became useless when humans attacked supply lines and maintenance facilities. The Admiral was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake in attacking New Haven. These humans were not the soft farmers his scouts had reported. They were warriors who had chosen to live as farmers until someone threatened their families. Every casualty report that reached his flagship told the same story of humans fighting with a ferocity that his own soldiers could not match. Captain Rodriguez and the rescue fleet pushed their engines beyond safe limits as they raced toward New Haven. The Retributions, Faster ships had formed an advance force that would arrive first, while the heavier vessels followed with the supplies and reinforcements that the colony desperately needed. Rodriguez studied the tactical situation and began planning the battle that would drive the Zephyrians away from human space. But unknown to the military commanders, an even larger force was converging on New Haven. Civilian ships from across human space were joining the rescue effort, carrying everything from medical supplies to mining explosives. Retired veterans were coming out of peaceful retirement to defend a colony they had never seen. Young volunteers were leaving their families to fight for strangers who shared only their humanity. General Wells watched the growing armada on her strategic displays and felt a fierce pride in the species she served. Humanity had been scattered across the galaxy, divided by distance and politics and competing interests. But the attack on New Haven was bringing them together in a way that no politician or philosopher had ever achieved. The Zephyrians had wanted to test human resolve by attacking what they thought was the weakest human settlement. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The fourth day of the siege brought something that Admiral Crixthack had never seen in 20 years of conquest across the galaxy. The humans of New Haven were not just surviving his assault, they were learning from it. Every attack his forces made was met with new defenses. Every tactic his commanders used was countered by innovations that seemed to appear overnight. Dr. Lisa Carter had transformed her medical facility into something that would have impressed the best military surgeons in human space. She had developed new surgical techniques specifically designed to treat Zephyrian bioweapon injuries, working with equipment that was never meant for battlefield medicine. Her success rate was now higher than most military hospitals achieved in peacetime conditions. The doctor had also begun studying captured Zephyrian weapons and armor, learning how the alien technology worked so she could better treat the injuries it caused. What she discovered was that the insects had designed their weapons to cause maximum pain and fear, rather than quick death. This knowledge helped her save lives, but it also made her angry in a way that surprised her. Roy Henderson gathered his expanded team in the underground training facility that had once been a school gymnasium. His group now included 60 colonists who had proven themselves in combat, ranging from teenage farm workers to retired grandmothers who had served in colonial militias decades earlier. They were all learning to fight as a unit with deadly efficiency. The former Marine captain had developed new tactics based on the unique conditions of New Haven. His fighters used the irrigation tunnels to move unseen across the battlefield, emerging to strike at Zephyrian units before vanishing back underground. They had learned to coordinate attacks through hand signals and predetermined routes, making them nearly impossible to track or predict. Mrs. Nancy Phillips had been teaching third-grade reading when the invasion began. Now she led night raids against enemy supply convoys with the same patience and attention to detail that she had once used to help children learn their letters. Her team specialized in destroying Zephyrian equipment and capturing weapons that could be turned against their former owners. Mr. Kevin Brown had spent his days as the colony librarian helping people find books and information. His knowledge of insect behavior from years of reading biology texts now helped him predict Zephyrian movement patterns. He could tell the defense teams exactly where the aliens would establish their next command post or which route they would use for their next assault. Jake Morrison's daily broadcast to the colonists had become legendary throughout human space. His calm farmer's voice describing the day's victories and losses with the same tone he once used for weather reports reached not just New Haven, but every human world that could receive the transmissions. People across the galaxy listened to his updates and felt pride in what the colonists were achieving. The colony administrator had access to captured Zephyrian communication equipment that his technical teams had managed to crack. This gave the humans their greatest advantage yet, the ability to intercept every enemy transmission and predict every attack before it happened. The hunters had truly become the hunted. Dr. Carter made a breakthrough on the 5th day when she successfully decoded the Zephyrian biological command protocols embedded in their weapons. She discovered that the aliens used bioneural interfaces that could be disrupted with the right electromagnetic frequency. Within hours, human technicians had built devices that could shut down Zephyrian equipment from a distance. The first test of the new weapon came during a Zephyrian assault on the colony's main water treatment plant. As the alien soldiers advanced with their energy weapons ready, human defenders activated the electromagnetic disruptors. Every piece of Zephyrian technology within 200 meters simply stopped working, leaving the aliens armed with nothing but their natural claws and mandibles. Roy Henderson's fighters emerged from concealment to engage the disabled aliens in close combat. The humans had prepared for this possibility by training with improvised weapons and hand-to-hand fighting techniques. The Zephyrians discovered that without their technological advantages, they were no match for humans who fought with desperation and creativity. The battle for the water plant became a turning point in the siege. For the first time, the colonists captured significant numbers of Zephyrian prisoners and intact equipment. Dr. Carter began studying living aliens to understand their biology better, while the technical teams reverse-engineered, captured weapons to create more powerful versions of their electromagnetic disruptors. Admiral Crixthak watched his invasion force being systematically destroyed by creatures he had dismissed as primitive mammals. His casualties had reached 60%, and his remaining forces were trapped in defensive positions while humans controlled most of the colony. His calls for reinforcements from the collective had gone unanswered, leaving him alone with the consequences of his terrible mistake. The Zephyrian admiral tried changing his tactics, using orbital bombardment to destroy entire sections of the colony, rather than trying to capture them intact. But the humans had prepared for this too, moving their essential operations deep underground where his ship's weapons could not reach them. Every building he destroyed was just another empty shell hiding the real infrastructure beneath. Jake Morrison coordinated the colony's defense from command bunkers that could survive direct hits from spacecraft weapons. His people had built their homes to last with redundant systems and multiple backup plans for every critical function. The Zephyrians could destroy the surface of New Haven, but they could not destroy the colony itself. By the end of the 5th day, the situation had completely reversed from the Admiral's original plan. Instead of conquered humans begging for mercy, he found himself commanding a demoralized force that was slowly being picked apart by an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. The easy conquest had become a disaster that would haunt the Zephyrian collective for generations. Dr. Carter's evening medical report showed something that amazed everyone who heard it. Despite 5 days of intense combat against a superior alien force, the colonists had lost fewer than 100 people. Her innovations in battlefield medicine and the colony's prepared defensive positions had kept casualties far lower than anyone had dared hope. Roy Henderson's tactical report was equally impressive. His expanded resistance force had grown to over 300 active fighters, with another 500 colonists providing support and intelligence. They had captured enough Zephyrian equipment to arm every adult in the colony and had developed countermeasures for most alien weapon systems. As night fell over New Haven, the colonists prepared for what they hoped would be their final battle. Help was finally approaching from across human space, and the Zephyrians were learning that attacking a human colony was the galaxy's deadliest mistake. Captain Alex Rodriguez felt his heart pound as the rescue fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system. What he saw through the retribution sensors made him grip his command chair until his knuckles turned white. The space around the colony planet was filled with the twisted wreckage of Zephyrian ships, floating like broken toys in the darkness between the stars. The orbital area that should have been controlled by 300 alien warships now contained fewer than 50 vessels still capable of fighting. Debris fields marked the locations where colonists had somehow turned agricultural satellites and mining equipment into kinetic weapons that could destroy spacecraft. The farmers of New Haven had not just survived the siege, they had won it. Admiral Crixthak watched the approaching human fleet with the resignation of a commander who knew his career was over. His invasion force had been destroyed by creatures his intelligence reports had dismissed as harmless primitives. Of the 60,000 soldiers he had landed on New Haven, fewer than 15,000 remained combat effective. The rest were dead, wounded, or missing. In the maze of tunnels beneath the human colony, the final battle began when Captain Rodriguez's advance ships engaged the remaining Zephyrian vessels in orbit above New Haven. But the space combat was brief and one-sided. The alien ships were already damaged and demoralized from days of fighting colonists who had turned every piece of civilian equipment into a weapon. The human warships cut through them like wheat before a harvester. Admiral Crixthack's flagship was boarded by human Marines led by Colonel Roy Henderson, who had been promoted during the siege from his former rank as a colonial teacher. The alien admiral's final transmission to the collective was a warning that would echo through their empire for generations. Never attack a human colony again, he told them, because humans become something terrible when their families are threatened. But the real shock came when the rescue forces landed on New Haven's surface. Captain Rodriguez had expected to find a devastated world with broken survivors hiding in ruins. Instead, he discovered a colony that had not merely survived, but had evolved into something that made him proud and terrified at the same time. Jake Morrison met the rescue fleet at the rebuilt landing pad, his clothes still stained with soil from that morning's planting. He thanked Captain Rodriguez for coming, but politely informed him that New Haven no longer needed protection. The colony's children were already back in school, learning mathematics in the morning and tactical planning in the afternoon. The wheat fields were being replanted between defensive positions that looked like irrigation ditches. Dr. Lisa Carter had published her medical findings from the siege in a report that would revolutionize human understanding of alien biology and battlefield medicine. Her work during the battle had saved countless colonist lives and had also mapped every weakness in Zephyrian anatomy. Any human soldier who read her clinical descriptions would know exactly how to kill these particular aliens most efficiently. The doctor continued her research with captured Zephyrian equipment and prisoners, developing medical countermeasures for biological weapons that other alien species might use against human colonies. Her underground medical facility had become a center for xenological research that would benefit all of humanity for decades to come. Roy Henderson showed the arriving Marine officers around the colony's defensive network, explaining how ordinary buildings had been converted into fortress positions and how irrigation tunnels had become military transportation routes. The former teacher had created a training program that could turn farmers into soldiers in a matter of days, something that military academies said was impossible. The colonel's tactical innovations during the siege had proven that humans could adapt to any threat if they were properly motivated. His manual on colonial defense using civilian infrastructure would become required reading at every military school in human space. Enemy aliens would never again have the advantage of surprise when attacking human settlements. Mrs. Nancy Phillips had returned to teaching, but her classroom now included lessons on reconnaissance and fieldcraft along with traditional subjects. Her students learned to identify alien technology and track enemy movements as naturally as they learned to read and write. The galaxy had become a dangerous place, and human children needed to be prepared for whatever threats they might face. Mr. Kevin Brown expanded his library to include detailed files on every known alien species and their military capabilities. His research during the siege had helped the colonists predict enemy behavior, and his reports were now being studied by intelligence agencies across human space. The quiet librarian had become one of humanity's foremost experts on alien warfare. The story of New Haven spread throughout the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel. The Zephyrian collective found themselves diplomatically isolated as other alien species reconsidered their territorial ambitions. News of what happened when humans were truly threatened reached every corner of known space, changing the balance of power forever. Captain Rodriguez stayed on New Haven for 3 days, studying how the colonists had achieved their impossible victory. What he learned convinced him that humanity's expansion into the galaxy would never be stopped by alien aggression. The species that could turn farmers into warriors overnight would not be conquered by anyone. General Patricia Wells received detailed reports from the New Haven rescue mission and immediately began implementing the lessons learned across all human colonies. Every settlement would have hidden defenses and emergency protocols based on what Jake Morrison's people had accomplished. The galaxy's predators would find no easy targets among human worlds. The collective's military leadership spent months analyzing the disaster at New Haven, trying to understand how their superior technology and numbers had been defeated so completely. Their conclusion was simple and terrifying. Humans possessed something that no other species had: the ability to transform ordinary civilians into deadly warriors when their survival was threatened. Jake Morrison's final report to Earth Defense Command was brief and matter-of-fact. New Haven had survived its test and emerged stronger than before. The colony would continue to grow food and raise families, but now everyone understood that peace was something worth fighting for. The farmers would tend their fields with weapons close at hand and children who knew how to use them. The wheat fields of New Haven grew tall and golden under the alien sun, fed by soil enriched with the ashes of those who had dared to attack a human home. In the quiet evenings, children played in parks built over bunkers while their parents planned both harvests and defensive strategies. The galaxy had learned its lesson about the price of threatening humanity. The deadliest mistake had taught the universe that humans might seek peace among the stars. But when their families were endangered, they became the most dangerous predators that space had ever known.